Good morning. Today I'll be reading to you from the sixth book in the Left Behind series. It's called Assassins. And today I'm going to be reading chapter 4. The new computer installed, and David has be on the of transmissions in Judah and Cameron Williams. The former had the best in the world, save Carpathia himself, and word studies in his lifetime of study. Buck, on the other hand, produced a weekly cyber magazine called The Truth. He too had a huge following, who reminded who remembered when he was the celebrated youngest senior writer for Global Weekly. He became publisher when all news outlets, print and electronic, named Global Weekly. When Buck's true sympathies were exposed and he became known as a believer in Christ, he became a fugitive, linked with Carpathia's former lover, Hattie Durham, as well as with Tyson Ben Judah. He had to live in hiding or travel incognito. Buck urged his readers, keep your copy of Global Community Weekly, the finest example of news speak since the term we coined. The day before each new issue, visit the truth online and get the real story behind the propaganda the government has foisted upon you. David has said, loved the reaction at the palace to Buck's weekly counters of GC Weekly. The truth was indeed the truth, and everyone knew it. David had allowed him to monitor every computer in the vast compound. She visited Buck's magazine. Using the enormous satellite tracking dishes and micro helped design the transmission for the state side. Distances between various points. On paper, such calculations take hours. On a calculator, less time. But on a computer, the results are virtually instantaneous. David planted, however, what he called a floating multiplier. In layman's terms, anytime the computer was assigned a calculation, a random component transported side and a third allow which did there be computer useful. Should someone's suspicion be raised and they check the computer against an uncontaminated calculator, the computer would eventually flush the bug and give a correct reading. Once the techie was convinced the previous had been human error or temporary glitch, he would move on to the next calculation and hours or days of its own. David assumed that by the time the inconsistencies of the machines became an issue, the project would fall so far behind that it would be scrapped. Meanwhile, the computers used to generate Tyson's teaching and Buck's magazine were programmed to change their separate combinations of routes. Under the guise of getting a bead on Williams's base, The techies in David's department spent a lot of time studying the online magazine itself. That Williams had inside information, but no one knew his sources. David knew Buck used dozens of contacts, including David himself, but Buck always cleverly shaded the input to protect coming by revealing that it has been a shock to the Carpathia regime. Honest, forthright men of character seek to discuss their difference diplomatically, an editorial began. Such a man of honor was Mwangi Nwego of Botswana, who insisted more than 3 years ago that Nikolai Carpathia replace him as Secretary General of the United Nations. That selfless, forward thinking gesture resulted in the great global community we enjoy today, a world divided into 10 equal regions, each governed by a subordinate. His Excellency asked Supreme Commander Leon Fortunato to visit the Honorable Mr. Nwego and try to persuade him to let the Potent's reconstruction effort rebuild Botswana. Nwego, the great African statesman, had insisted that his own nation wait until even poorer countries were helped. Mr. Nwego had been so benevolent that the meeting had to be held in Johannesburg rather than Gaborone, because the Botswanian capital airport still could not accommodate the large GC plane. When United President Rehoboth learned of the meeting, he generously offered every courtesy and offered to sit in for the sake of diplomacy. This is the global community politely declined, because the nature of the business was more personal than political. Potent Rehoboth was promised his own meeting with His Excellency. Rehoboth must have misunderstood somehow and assumed that Potent Carpathia was meeting with Mr. Nwego, while the GC was unaware of any jealousy or anger over Rehoboth's exclusion from the meeting. Clearly, the regional Potent was murderously angry. He assigned assassins to murder Nwego and his aides, replace them as impostors, and board Global Community 1, the Condor 216, to murder His Excellency. His henchmen and Mr. Abdullah Smith said the Supreme Commander. Immediately cockpit crew accompanied the article, the story apart. In his breezy style, Buck ran down the facts. What the global community brass doesn't want citizens to know is that the relationship between Carpathia and Nwego had long ago gone south. Nuemo had not been so magnanimous as we have been led to believe. He stepped down from his UN post under heavy pressure, believing he would receive one of the 10 regional potentate positions and that Botswana would be awarded use of the agricultural formula discovered in Israel, which Carpathia has used in negotiating with many other countries. Nuemo had gone from near deity to peri in his own homeland because of the shameless neglect on the part of the global community. The formula was never delivered. Botswana was ignored in the reconstruction effort. Nuemo saw his potentate status bestowed instead of his archival, the despot Rehoboth, who had pillaged his own nation of Sudan and made multimillionaires of his many wives and offspring. He was so unpopular in Sudan that he located the opulent GC Regional Palace in Johannesburg rather than Khartoum, as inconveniently non-central as he could have without placing it in Cape Town. The GC knew Rehoboth and Nuemo were bitter rivals, and he deliberately scheduled the high-level meeting on board GC-1. They forced it onto Rehoboth's own turf. Rehoboth assumed Carpathia was on board and vulnerable to attack because Nuemo thought he was on board as well. The rise to slap Nuemo in the face also fooled Rehoboth, who had been invited to join the meeting, as yet another surprising insult to Nuemo. Personnel who escaped with their lives were more lucky than heroic. GC peacekeeping forces had been swayed by Rehoboth and did not respond for several minutes after the plane was fired upon. The assassins were not shot. One fled and 2 died from the smoke and fire and sulfur plague, as did many others that day. Rehoboth knew enough to stay at his palace during what he hoped was Carpathia's execution. When it went awry and he himself was eliminated, the peacekeeping forces once again immediately fell into line and finally contained the area. The deaths of Rehoboth's entire family, attributed by the GC to the plague, were clearly executions. Thus far, the plague has killed roughly 10% of the Earth's population. What are the odds that every member of an extensive household would be stricken in one day? Buck Cyber magazine commented on all the follies of the Carpathia regime for putting a pretty face on international tragedy and an assumption that you care about parades in the potentate's honor when death marches the globe. David enjoyed patching into Carpathia and Fortunato's offices shortly after Buck's magazine hit the net each week. Where are we on tracing this? Carpathia demanded of Leon that morning. We have an entire department section on it, full time, sir. How many? I believe 70 were scheduled, but due to attrition, probably 60. That should be plenty, should it not? I should think so, sir. Where is he getting his information? It is as if he is camped outside our door. You said yourself he was the best journalist in the world. This goes beyond skill and writing ability, Leon. I would accuse him of making this up, but we both know he is not. That afternoon, David received a memo from Leon asking that the metal detectors destroyed in the airplane be replaced. Before His Excellency appears in public again, that gave David an idea. Might he have a role in Carpathia's demise if he could ensure the metal detectors would malfunction at strategic junctures? If he could make computers whimsical and he made metal detectors fickle? He wrote back, Supreme Commander Fortunato, I shall have the new metal detectors delivered and operational and stored on the Phoenix 216 within 10 days. In the meantime, I have a crew thoroughly going over every detail of the plane so it meets the standards of the potentate. I am personally overseeing this with the input of the cockpit crew. David and Annie, along with Mac and Abdullah, both slowly mending, spent their off hours planting a bugging device in the Phoenix 216, so sophisticated that it delivered near recording studio sound quality to the headsets of both pilot and first officer. When it was finished, David asked his top technicians to check the plane for bugs. A unit of 4 experts combed the fuselage for 6 hours and judged it clean. Rayford was bemused by Bo Hansen standing outside the Pewaukee gate trying to flag down help. "What an idiot," he said. T, still sitting behind him at the tower desk, said, "What's he doing?" "Hitchhiking, I think. Ran out of gas." He turned around to reach for the phone. "Well, I got to tell Dwayne Tuttle how to get here." T was rising. "Don't get up," Rayford said. "It'll be a short call." "I've got something I have to do anyway," T said. "Then can we talk?" Rayford looked at his watch at Tuttle as Tuttle's phone rang. "I'm good for a little while." Mrs. Tuttle answered, and as Rayford introduced himself and reminded her of his daughter's email and how he had gotten their number, he idly strode back to the window. Trudy called Dwayne to the phone, and Rayford was glad he didn't have to speak for a few seconds. He had lost his breath. T had driven out to Bo's car and was pouring gasoline into his tank from a can. Was it possible they were in league with each other? Could T have fooled him all this time? Something told him that if he had a moment to think about it, he could come up with some other explanation. The locust had not bitten T. He had the mark of God on his forehead. He knew church people, and the right things seemed genuine. But now, aiding and abetting the enemy, helping the man responsible for Hattie's flight. "Mr. Steele," Dwayne said. "Mr. Tuttle, or should I call you Dart? That was quite a story, sir." T returned and slowly mounted the stairs as Rayford finished making arrangements for the flight to France. When he hung up, he looked askance at T as they sat across the desk from each other. T's dark face mirrored Rayford's own look. "You think I didn't notice?" Rayford began. "Notice what?" "What you were just doing. That little something you had to do." "So what was I doing?" Rayford rolled his eyes. "I saw you, T. You were giving gas to Bo." T gave him a "so" look. "The guy who I know who Bo is, Ray. I'm beginning to wonder who you are." "Me? I'm not the one." T stood. "You want to check my mark, don't you? Well, come on and do it." Rayford was stunned. How had it come to this? They had been friends, brothers. "I don't have to check your mark, T. I need to know what you thought you were doing." "I asked to talk to you, Ray. Remember?" "Yeah, so?" "I wanted to know what you thought you were doing with Bo." "What's the mystery, T? I got him to give me the information I needed. I didn't aid or abet him like I did, like you did." "That's what you call what I did?" "What do you call it, T? You guys working together against me behind my back? What?" T shook his head sadly. "Yeah, Ray, I'm in concert with a kid 2 sandwiches short of a picnic, so I can turn the tables on my Christian brother." "That's what it looks like. What am I supposed to think?" T stood and walked to the window. Rayford couldn't make any of it make sense. "What are you supposed to think, Ray? Is that Bo Hansen is not likely long for this world. He's going to die and go to hell just like his buddy Ernie did the other day. He's the enemy, sure, but he's not one of those who treat like scum to make sure they don't find out who we really are. He already knows who we are, bro. We're the guys who follow Ben Judah and believe in Jesus. We don't buy and sell guys like Bo Rayford. We don't play them, lie to them, cheat them, steal from them, blackmail them. We love them. We plead with them. Bo is dumb enough to have given you what you needed without making him think his ship had come in and then sinking it for him. I'm not saying I have the answers, Ray. I don't know how we could have got the information another way, but what you did sure didn't feel loving and Christian to me. I'd rather you had bought the information, let him be the bad guy. You were as bad as he was. Well, I said more than I planned. You play this one however you want, but keep me out of it from now on." Buck half expected Chaim Rosenzweig to be in his wheelchair. But the old man was everything he had remembered: small, wiry, aged, more perhaps, wild white hair, a beatific smile. He opened his arms for an embrace. Cameron, Cameron, my friend, how are you? Good to see you. A sight for old, tired eyes. What brings you to Israel? You do, friend, Buck said as Chaim led him by the arm to the parlor. We're all worried about you. Ah, Chaim said, waving him off. Tyson is worried he won't convert me because the horses trample me. Should he be? May I take back the news of your conversion? You never know, Cameron, but you need not ask, am I right? You who can see the horses can also see each other's marks. So tell me, does mine show? The way he said mine made Buck's heart leap, and he leaned forward only to see nothing. We can see each other's, you know, Buck said, and the mighty men on the lion horses, too. I know. You don't believe it. Would you if you were I, Cameron? Oh, Dr. Rosenzweig, I was you. Don't you realize that? I was a journalist, a pragmatic mastic, a realist. I could not be convinced until I would be convinced. James' eyes danced, and Buck was reminded how the man enjoyed a good debate. So I am unwilling. That is my problem. Perhaps. And yet that makes no sense, does it? Why should I be unwilling? I want it to be true. What a story. An answer to this madness. Relief from the cruelty. Oh, Cameron, I am closer than you think. That's what you said last time. I fear you will wait too long. My house staff, they are all believers now, you know. Jacob, his wife, his mother, Stefan, Jonas too. But we lost him, you heard? Buck nodded, sad. Chaim had suddenly lost his humor. You see, Cameron, these are the things I don't understand. If God is personal, like you say, cares about his children, and is all powerful, is there not a better way? Why the judgments, the plagues, the destructions, the death? Tyson says we had our chance, so now it's no more, Mr. Nice Guy. There is a cruelty about it all that hides the love I am supposed to see. Buck leaned forward. Tyson also says that even allowing 7 years of obvious tribulation is more than we deserve from God. We did not believe because we could not see it. Well, now there is no doubt. We're seeing, and yet people still resist and rebel. Chaim fell silent, then clapped his palms to his knees. Well, he said at last, don't worry about me. I confess I am feeling my age. I am fearful, frightened, homebound, you know. I cannot bring myself to venture out. Carpathia, in whom I believe, as I would my own son, has fallen fraudulent. Buck wanted to probe, but dared not. Any decision had to be Rosenzweig's idea, not a plant from Buck or anyone else. I am studying, I am praying that Tyson is wrong, that the plagues and the torments do not keep getting worse, and I keep busy. How? Projects. Your science and reading, and more, such as. Oh, you are such the journalist today. All right, I'll tell you. My staff thinks me mad. Maybe I am. I have a wheelchair. You want to see it? You need a wheelchair? Not yet, but the day will come. The torment from the locusts weaken me. I have blood counts and other test results that show me at high risk for stroke. You're healthy as a mule. Rosenzweig sat back and laughed. Very good. No one wants to be healthy as a horse anymore. But I am not. I am high risk and I want to be ready. It sounds defeatist, doctor. The right diet and exercise, fresh air. I knew you would get to that. I like to be prepared. How else are you preparing? I'm sorry? What are you working on? In your utility room. Who told you about that? No one who knew anything. Jacob merely mentioned that you spend a lot of time on projects in there. Yes. What is it? What are you doing? Projects. I never knew you to be handy in that way. There is a lot you don't know about me, Cameron. May I consider you a dear friend, sir? I wish you would, but do dear friends refer to each other so formally? It's difficult for me to call you Chaim. Call me what you wish, but you are my dear friend, and so I am happy to call myself yours. Then I want to know more about you. If there is a lot about you I don't know, I don't feel like a friend. Chaim pulled a drape back and peered out. No smoke today. It will come again, though. Tyson teaches that the horsemen will not leave us until a third of mankind is dead. Can you imagine that world, Cameron? That will leave only half the population since the disappearances. Truly, we are facing the end of civilization. It may not be what Tyson thinks it is, but it's something. Buck said nothing. Chaim had ignored his salvos, but perhaps he did not press. Rayford hung his head. T, he said, his voice suddenly hoarse and weak. I don't know what to say. You knew what to say to Bo. You played him like a... Rayford held up a hand. Please, T, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking. You seemed to enjoy it. Rayford wished he could disappear. God forgive me. I did enjoy it. What's the matter with me? It's like I've lost my mind. At the house, I fly off the handle. Leah, the newcomer I told you about, she's brought out the worst in me now. No, I can't put that on her either. I've been awful to her. I don't understand myself anymore. If you ever understood yourself, you were way ahead of me. But don't be too hard on yourself, bro. You've got a modicum of stress in your life. We all do, T, even Bo. You know, not just tonight, but never ever have I seen Bo as anything but a scoundrel. He is a scoundrel, Ray, but he's also, I know, that's what I'm saying. The day I met him, he was putting down believers, and I've had a thing about him since. I want him put in his place, and I want Glad for the chance to do it. Some saint, huh? T did counter. Rayford got the point. What do I do now? Chase him down and start being Christ-like to him? T shook his head and shrugged. Got me. I'd sooner think your best approach is to disappear from his life. He's going to suspect any radical change. I should at least apologize. Not unless you're ready to prove it by paying him for the information you thought you were buying. Now he's the good guy and I'm the bad guy. I'll never say Bo's the good guy, Ray. As for you being the bad guy, I didn't say it, you did. Rayford sat slumped for several minutes while T busied himself with paperwork. You're a good friend, Rayford said finally. To be honest with me, I mean, not a lot of guys would care enough. T moved to the front of the desk and sat on it. I like to think you'd do the same for me. Like you need it. Why not? I didn't expect you'd need it either. Well, anyway, thanks. T punched him on the shoulder. So what's the deal with the Tuttles? You going to get to fly a Super J? Think I can handle it? All the stuff you've flown? They'd say if you can drive a Gulfstream, the big one, this is like a fast version of that. Sort of a Porsche to a Chevy. I'll drive like a teenager. You can't wait. David was at first warmed, then alarmed when he received a personal email early the next morning from Tyson Ben Judah. After assuring David he wished to meet him sometime before Gloria's appearing, Tyson came to his point. I do not understand all that you are able to do so miraculously for us there with your marvelous technical genius. Normally, I stay out of the political aspects of our work and do not even question what is going on. My calling is to teach the scriptures, and I want to stay focused. Dr. Rosenzweig, whom I am certain you have heard of, taught me much when I was in way over my head in university botany. I was in way over my head in university botany. My specialty is history, literature, and languages. Science was not my field. Struggling, I finally went to him. He told me the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. In other words, of course, focus. So I am here focusing and letting Captain Steele and his daughter put together the co-op. Buck Williams, his magazine, and the occasional fugitive mission, and so forth. But Mr. Hassid, we have a problem. I let Captain Steele run off on his mission to track down Hattie Durham. I know you have been kept abreast without asking him what he had found out about Carpathia's knowledge of her whereabouts. No one but the uncaring public believes she went down in a plane, that the GC allowed the patient falsehood to be circulated tells me it somehow plays into their hands. My fear, of course, is that they now feel free to track her down and kill her. For in the mind of the public, she is already dead. Her only advantage in pretending to be dead is to somehow embarrass or even endanger Carpathia. All that to say this, I had been under the impression that none of your clandestine work there had turned up anything about knowledge of her whereabouts on Carpathia's part. I cannot help thinking Rayford would have been more prudent to wait searching for Hattie until he knew for sure he would not be walking into a GC trap. I may be a paranoid scholar who should stick to his work, but if you know my history, you know that even I have been thrust into violence and danger by this evil world system. I am asking you, Mr. Hassid, if there is any possibility of digging up the remotest clue that could be rushed to Captain Steele before he walks blindly into danger. If you would be so kind as to let me know you received this, and also indicate whether you believe there is any hope of turning up anything helpful, I would be most grateful. In the matchless name of Christ, Tyson Ben Judah. David quickly tapped a response. Am dubious about odds for success, as I have been monitoring computer and phone and personal interaction at the highest levels here and have not heard even a conversation about Hattie, but will give this my full attention immediately. I will transmit to Captain Steele's secure phone anything pertinent and fully understand your concern. More later, but don't want to lose a minute. David frantically batted away on his laptop, accessing the massive hard drive, tapping into Palace mainframe and decodifying every encrypted file. He looked for any reference to Hattie Durham, HD, personal assistant, lover, pregnancy, child, fatigue, plane crash, and anything else he could think of. Of course, everything that had been said in the administrative offices for weeks was recorded on his monster mini disc, but the only subtitles there would be dates and locations. There was no time to listen to everything Fortunato or Carpathia had said since Hattie was reported dead. He called Annie, who rushed into his office. He closed the blinds and locked the door so no night crew could see him pacing, running his hands through his hair. What am I going to do, Annie? Tyson is right. Rayford is committing a huge blunder here, even if he lucks out. You know the GC either has to have Hattie in custody or have killed her. They'll be watching the site where she was supposed to have been hidden. Whoever comes looking for her is going to find not her, but GC. She's just bait. Rayford has to know that. You'd think, she said. Help me, he said. It's not that I don't want to, David, but I agree you're looking for the proverbial needle in. What were those stateside people thinking? That the GC were their state, or that the GC brought the phony crash story? Surely they knew better. I didn't know Rayford had finally gotten a bead on her until he was already gone. Why wouldn't he have come to me for one last effort to dig up GC intelligence? She shook her head. How secure are you, David? Sorry, what? You're in their computers, their offices, they're playing on their phones. Has anyone even begun to suspect you yet? He shook his head. The computer installation slowdown should have raised a flag, but I didn't sense suspicion from Leon. If I had to guess, I'd say I'm in solid with them. I have too many irons in the fire to not get burned eventually, but for now, I'm golden here. There's your answer then, superstar. Don't make me guess. Rayford's in the air. Just ask them. Come again? Go straight to Leon. Tell him it's none of your business, but you've been noodling the plane crash news. And you're always admired his insight and wisdom and street smarts. You know the drill. Suggest that maybe that plane crash wasn't all it appeared, and say you want his take on it. Annie, you're a genius. And that is the end of chapter 14. Next, I'll be reading chapter 15. Thank you for joining me, and have a wonderful day.